Today we're going to be doing a quick video on the best bed for a German Shepherd. Now, 99% of the time, if I'm recommending a dog bed to one of my clients with a German Shepherd, I'm going to be recommending the Amazon Basics Elevated Cooling Bed. And that's what I have set up for you guys here. Now, the majority of the time, you're probably going to end up using the extra large model or the large. And I think the extra large is maybe up to about 110 pounds and the large is maybe up to about 90 pounds. Now, I brought out my Shepherd Mix Forest for our video today. He's 70 pounds just for reference. But a lot of times I let him, use either one. Now, let's just talk about, why I like these beds so much when it comes to German Shepherds. So, first and foremost, these beds are just really inexpensive. So I don't think that they're not necessarily the fanciest or the bougiest beds out there, but for how cheap they are, there's really just a lot of value that you can get out of them. So that's kind of the first thing that I like, is they're just inexpensive. Any other type of fabric bed, those things are like a foam bed, like a really, orthopedic ones. I mean, some of those beds are like $100. It's kind of crazy. So, so that's the first thing, inexpensive. Now, the second thing is probably the biggest appeal, is that there's a cooling aspect to these elevated beds. So obviously German Shepherds have got a lot of hair. Any breed that has really thick fur is going to have a little bit of a problem probably in the summertime of sleeping on a fabric or foam type bed. So a really big part of my dog training is teaching dogs what we call the spot command, or like the place command, which is teaching dogs to lay down and stay on a bed. And for these thick-haired dogs, a lot of times they want to lay next to the bed, and it can kind of open up problems just because they're too hot. So these elevated beds, there's a little bit of a breeze that kind of comes underneath them, and this fabric is really breathable, so that air can kind of come up from underneath and help keep them cool. Now, there are sometimes I'll even put this bed over an air conditioning vent, so there's legitimately a source of cold air coming up. But that's really up to you guys. Now, but we can also kind of get the best of both worlds, that even though this bed is cooling, if you wanted to throw, some blankets on here, or sometimes what I'll do is I'll put a smaller cushion bed on top of this bed, so that way half the time he ends up sleeping on the cushion here, and then sometimes he ends up laying on the other half that's more of the cooling ventilated side. Now, so that's probably one of the biggest appeals of why I like these for thick-haired dogs like a Shepherd. Now, kind of leading into the next point is that they're easier to clean. So especially if I'm just throwing the blankets on here instead of a fabric bed, I really prefer these beds because they're so easy to clean. Where even if we have a very reliable potty trained dog, if you're using a foam bed and they just get sick and throw up, or just have a one-off accident, it is very difficult to restore a foam bed back to its original state. So these ones, all you have to do is just spray them down with some disinfectant and wipe them down. And because there's really nothing absorbent on these beds, there's not going to be anywhere for, pee or, vomit or anything like that to kind of get stuck in the bed. Now, and then again, if you're just throwing blankets on here as more of a cushion, that is going to be a lot easier to just throw in the wash once a week if you really want to keep things clean. Where, foam type dog beds, if you wash them too frequently, they just fall apart, much faster. So that's probably the next point that I really like about these beds, is they're easier to clean. Now, from a training standpoint, and this is probably the last thing we'll talk about before I take these things apart and show you guys what it's like to put them back together. From a training standpoint, I think that these elevated beds can work really well when we're working with German Shepherds, because some puppies and dogs that are newer to training, something about the bed being elevated off the ground, I think helps them connect the dots of staying on the boundary a little bit better. Now, that's not necessarily the reason I buy these beds, but I do think that it helps dogs figure out how to stay on the boundary a little bit easier. And the last thing is talking about like a puppy German Shepherd, or maybe a dog that has a little bit more of a tendency to chew on beds or destroy beds. That I'm definitely not going to say that this is the best chew-proof bed in the world. You know, I'll probably do videos down the road on a model that's a little bit better for like really, really heavy chewers. But this type of bed is going to be a lot more chew-proof than like a fabric type bed, where, you know, a lot of times with puppies that are teething, they kind of just like rip a little hole in it and then they start pulling the stuffing out. And I think it kind of, they just really enjoy doing that. And I think it just opens up this doorway of constantly ripping it and pulling the stuffing out. So these, there's not any stuffing for them to pull out, and around the edges, there's really nothing for them to grab onto. So like with a little bit of time and consistency, I'm sure they could start to pull some of the threads and stuff like that. And that's why I'm going to say that these are probably not entirely chew proof, but they're going to do a lot better than any type of fabric bed or something kind of like that. So, so those are really the main appeals for these particular beds as far as German Shepherds are concerned. So why don't we take one of these apart and then I'll show you how to put them back together, and then we'll probably wrap up the video from there. Okay guys, so this is for the most part what it looks like when everything is taken apart. You know, if you lay everything out when you get it out of the box. Now the only thing I didn't do is I just left this piece in just because it's a little redundant and I don't want this video to be longer than what it needs to be. But I just left this side in because we're going to be showing you what it looks like when we put that one together. Okay, now in the box, it's going to come with a tool that you can use to put this thing together, so you don't need to go out and buy anything. Now, the first step is going to be putting all the different poles in. Okay, so the longest poles are going to be in the front and back. Go. Okay, and then the shorter poles are going to be more lengthwise. And once you kind of get that pushed in, then we're going to be putting these in. Now, the one thing you have to be careful of with this is that you'll see one side has a little bit of like an indent in it. I'll bring it a little closer so you can see. Okay, this little indented piece should be facing out. Okay, so when you put it in, just make sure that the indented side is facing away from the bed. Okay, and then there's also a little bit of like an arc on this horizontal pole that will line up with the shape of the inside of this piece. Okay. And I'm going to start by just using my fingers, and I'll probably tighten everything once I get the whole bed kind of put together. Okay. Again, making sure that the little indented piece is facing out. I think the first few times I put this together, I did it backwards and had to redo the whole thing. Okay. All right, and then like I said at the beginning of the video, the other side I just left put together. So that is going to be a little bit faster for me to show you how to put this thing together. And pretty much all the different sizes have the same, very, very similar assembly. The biggest bed, this extra large one, does have one extra component to it that the other ones do not have. Okay, and I'll show you guys that here in a second. Okay, so now that I've got the bulk of it put together, now I'm going to go through and tighten these with the wrench. because the first time I did it, I was trying to tighten them all like one at a time as I was putting it together, and it just kind of throws things out of whack a little bit. So that's why I recommend only kind of half screwing them first until everything's put together, and then go through and tighten everything. And something I did not point out earlier in the video is that you can actually get a green version of this. So for whatever reason you prefer that, you can definitely do that. These light gray kind of gets stained a little bit from the Georgia red clay. So the green might have worked a little better if I was worried about that, but I don't really care about that kind of stuff. Now, if this were any of the smaller models, that would pretty much be it. But the extra large model comes with this extra piece here. Okay, that's just an extra, like an added support. Okay, so basically we just put these on. This is going to go underneath in the middle. This part can be a little bit tricky. Actually, so we're going to lock this in on one side. Then we're going to lock it in on this side. And that is pretty much everything you need to know about the elevated or the Amazon Basic elevated cooling dog bed. So thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.